in terms of its relevance. And also the other one was related to maximal sprint speed, which a lot of people may not think is that relevant to middle and long distance runners.
People in running would understand this because
Absolutely.
it fits into this idea of speed reserve. So as an example for people in the distance community, if your target marathon pace is 4 minute kilometers, if your fastest 1K that you can do is 3 minutes 50, you're in a lot of trouble when it comes to running at 4 minute kilometers. But if your fastest 1 kilometer is 250, for instance, take a whole minute off that, 4 minutes feels like absolutely cruising.
Yes.
And obviously that's extended over a marathon, so that's that speed reserve, but that goes all the way down to even shorter events. So, those who know a little bit more about my track coaching background will know that I coach, say, 400 meter runners. One of the things in 400 meters that we always talk about is the athlete actually being fast enough to be able to go through the segments and still feel relatively relaxed. And that's that whole idea of speed reserve. And so the maximal sprint speed for a distance runner is extremely important. Even though on a surface level, it may appear like it's not particularly relevant.
Well, it's extremely relevant for middle distance runners because, how many runs finish in more of a sprint finish?
Yeah.
Or not to mention in terms of tactics, particularly middle distance, seeing variations in speed and maybe some.
And to give that an example of that, we're fortunate enough, and we're hoping that at some stage we'll get him on the podcast to spend some time with Justin Rinaldi, who's probably Australia's most eminent 800 meter coach at the moment. And I asked him not that long ago, what are the top athletes doing in the last 200 meters? And they're still running 26 seconds or so for the last 200, 26, 27, somewhere in that range. And so that means that your last 100 meters is going to be in that 13-second range. If you can only run 12 seconds, it's not going to happen in the 600 to 800 of your race. But if you can run 11 seconds and you've got a 2-second buffer, then there's very clear potential to do so.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this study is these benefits are seen from moderately trained to essentially elite athletes. So I think particularly when you're getting more towards that elite athlete where, yes, of course, a big component of their training program is going to be doing lots of aerobic conditioning. But there's that issue of window of diminishing returns, because for an elite athlete, this is something that's discussed in the paper. If we look at something like VO2 max, we know that that's a good measure of comparing elite versus non-elite runners. If you actually look at the elite running population group, the variation in VO2 max is not correlated with who wins the race versus who gets last in the race.
And so, like, even when we discussed this as our clinical group, a few of our physios sort of said, well, but what do you mean by that? So can you elaborate on why you might not necessarily see that correlation between VO2 max and the outcome within the elite population itself?
Oh, because there's multiple factors at play. And this is where the findings of the study are really relevant, because one of the things that actually is a good indicator of seeing the variation in performance in the elite group is some anaerobic measures. And
that's in middle distance running we're talking. So
that's
this is 800, 1500 meter type athletes.
Yes, I think it was even up to like 5,000.
Yeah, 5,000 is generally still considered
middle distance. There you go.